All right, so the first part of yesterday's assignment was going over slope. We had to find the slope given 2 points. Now, since we're given the 2 points, you have these 2 points. You just had to plug it into your equation. So one of the things that we had in our notes was the equation, which was m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that's what you're using on these two, since we didn't have a graph. Now, if we plug these in, I'm going to go ahead and assign these values as x1, y1, and x2, y2. But, again, if you chose to do it the other way, you'd still get the same answer. All right? So if this was your x2, y2, and this was your x1, y1, you'd still end up with the same answer. So, plug this into your equation. You have negative 10 minus negative 8 on top. And then you have negative 18 minus negative 4 on the bottom. So, these two we're going to actually add, because if you're subtracting negative, it's like adding a positive. Now, hold on, I see some of you guys already starting to erase. Remember, what I just said a second ago. If you switch these around, that's okay. You should end up with the same answer. So, I know I saw a lot of you guys starting to erase. Hold off on that. All right. Because on here, if we go ahead and add these now, negative 10 plus 8 gives us a negative 2. Negative 18 plus 4 gives us a negative 14. 2 over 14 will reduce to 1 over 7. And since these are both negatives, it becomes a positive. So that's our final answer. Now, if you had reversed these, the only difference is when you do the subtraction, the two numbers would originally come out as positives. So we wouldn't have to change the signs. So again, you should end up with the same value of 1 over 7. Now, a common mistake on these problems with slope is my correct answer was a positive 1/7. If you got a negative 1/7, what that means is you didn't plug the top and the bottom in the same order. So if you ended up with a negative on that one in the end, only had like either the top or bottom come out to a negative, that means you switch the order in which you're doing them in. So be careful of that.
Hey,
because
is Friday a quiz or a test?
Friday is a test. So on here, again, it doesn't matter which one you call x1, y1, and x2, y2, but then once you plug them in, you have to plug them in the same order. So if I'm using 10 first on top, then 18 has to be used first on bottom. If I chose to use this one first on top, so the negative 8 first on top, then I'd have to do the negative 4 first on bottom. So again, that part of the order matters. But assigning them as x1, y1, and x2, y2, it doesn't matter which one you call those two things. All right, so then on number 2, same thing. Again, plug them in. So I'm not going to write out which one I'm assigning which value this time. But I have negative 20 minus negative 18 over 6 minus negative 20. On the top, again, that becomes adding a positive. So that's going to be a negative 2 on top. On the bottom, that also becomes adding a positive. This becomes a positive 26. That can be reduced to a negative 1 over 13. Any questions so far? All right. The next part was a little bit different. You're given equations and asked to find the slope. So you had to recognize what format are both of these equations in. These are both in slope intercept form. What did I just write there? I like rearranged all my letters. Slope intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So the slope is our m, right? So in here, it should be out here, and this one, it should be here. Well, number 3, what number do we have in front of this x? Anything? It's like saying -1. So our m value, our slope, is -1. Over here, now we have a number actually. So this one, the slope is 5. That's it. That's all you had to do on that one. Didn't have to. Make sure you read those directions, because all it asked for was slope of the line. Right? So make sure you read the directions. On 5 and 6, also under the same directions. We're finding the slope of these lines. Now, yes, they have points marked on here. You don't actually have to figure out what those points are. We can just count the difference since this is on a graph. So, how many units going from this point to this point do we go down? 8. So we went -8 units down. How many units did we go over? 1. That's in a positive direction. So for my slope, it's going to be -8 over 1. Or if I simplify that, -8 over 1 is just -8. And that's my slope. Number 6. Do I really have to do anything for this one? It's 0. So if you remember that a horizontal line is a 0 slope, that's all you really had to do. Now, could we have looked at the vertical and horizontal change? Sure. What's our vertical change, though? Is there a vertical change between those 2 points? No. So if there's no vertical change between these 2 points, then 0 would go on the top. So I could have said 0, and then I had a change of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on bottom. But 0 divided by any number is just 0. Man, if we're given a graph, all we have to do is identify the slope as the change in y over the change in x. All right, so those are our final answers there. 8 and 0. All right, down the bottom. Now you had to sketch the graph. This one gave you an x and y intercept. So most common mistake that I saw yesterday when I was helping a few people was I saw a lot of people trying to graph this as one point. Again, these are 2 separate points. One's the x-intercept, one's the y-intercept. So here, -2 for an x-intercept would be on the x-axis at -2. We'd have a point. So that's that one. This one, that's on our y-axis. So on the y-axis at +1. So then our line is just going to go through those points. And that's it. Now, the only time that graphing a line doesn't work if given the x and y intercepts is if you have them as the same point. What's the only place on the graph where the x and y intercept can be the same? 0. So if it was at 0, 0, we'd only end up having 1 point, and then we wouldn't be able to do our graph just based off x and y intercepts. So then on number 8, we have an x-intercept at +2. So we're on the positive side. We have our first point. Then we have a y-intercept at +5. So now it's up here. So our line this time looks something like that with a negative slope. Now, that's all those 2 asked us to do. We don't have to do anything else. So now let's go to the back. Anybody still need this before I flip it over? All right, on the back. Now, this one a little tricky, so I actually want to do 10 first. All right, and we'll come back to number 9. Because on number 9, there's a special scenario that happens. So on 10, we have our graph in standard form. Since it's in standard form, we can graph it by finding the x and y intercepts. So, remember, in order to find the y-intercept, we'd plug 0 in for x. Normally, I would just cover it up with my finger and say, all right, now we have 3y equals -9. We divide by 3 and we get, what do we get? -3. And if you want to show your work, you could show your work. You don't really have to for these because, again, it's easy just to say, all right, plugged in 0, that cancels out. Divide by the number that's there, and that's our intercept. That's all you really have to do. But again, if you want to show work, this would be it. Again, that gives us a point at -3. Then, for the x-intercept, plug 0 in for y. So that goes away. So our x-intercept is at -9. We don't have to do any work. There's no number to divide by. Well, that's a little off our chart, but we can go out a few more spots. So 7, 8, 9, right about there. Again, if you want to show work, you can show work. So x-intercept, we plug 0 in for y. So x equals -9. And that'd be all of our work. For our graph, we just need to connect those 2 points. That's it. Now, on number 9. So this is the one that I said was a little tricky. Because if we were to find our coordinates here, first let's find the x-intercept. Plug 0 in for y. Well, now we get x equals 0. So where's the x-intercept going to be? 0. So our x and y intercept would end up being that same point because this is on both the x and y axis. Can I graph just using that one point? I need 2 points to draw a line. So this one was a little tricky. This one you had to do a little bit of extra work. So in order to do this, we actually couldn't leave it in standard form. This is one where you'd actually have to change it to another format. So an easy format to go to from here would be slope-intercept. So if I want to take standard and change it to slope-intercept, I need to solve for y. So we have x plus 3y equals 0. We need to first try to isolate y, so we're going to move x over to the other side by subtracting the x. We get 3y equals -x. And although we don't need to put 0 there, I'm going to leave it there for the purpose of our equation. Again, you could have left it off and that would be fine. So then we have a 3 left over here on this side. And divide off the 3. And we get y equals, again, both of these values get divided by 3. So this would be -1/3 x. You could also leave x in the top, but again, I'm trying to get it into our slope-intercept form. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave the x next to the value. And on here, 0 divided by anything is still just 0. So again, you didn't really have to put the 0. But the reason why I did it here is because we want it in the format y equals mx plus b. So since I left the 0 there, I can see, all right, my y-intercept is 0, which we did already know that. And my slope is going to be -1/3. So from the point that we have, we can now go down 1 over 3. So down and to the right. So our next point is at down 1 over 3. So it would be right there. And then I can do it as many times as I need. Or if I want to, I could go back the other way. Because if I put the negative down here instead, all right, it'd still be the same answer. So 1 over negative 3 would be the same thing. So I could say that I go up 1 and back 3. And again, I have all my points in a straight line. I can now graph that line. So that's the only time we run into a problem with standard form and graphing, is if we have a point at our origin. Because if it's at the origin, that means that both the x and y intercepts are in the same spot. And you need at least 2 points to graph a line. All right. On to 11 and 12. So now, 11 we have in slope-intercept form. Actually, the rest of these are in slope-intercept form. So we can take these and we can graph them from that format. So we have a positive 3. We need to find positive 3 on our graph. So the b value is positive 3, which is a point at 0, 3. So that's what we have graphed. Then we're going to use our slope of 6 over 5 in order to go to the, whoops, sorry, I wrote down the wrong place. That's on the bottom, my bad. Up 6 into the right 5. So from here, up 6, 1, 2, 3. Oh, I ran into a problem. If I went up 6, I'd have a point way up here somewhere, right? So it's way off my graph. Probably not the best point to use. So what could I do instead? Say again? Well, it's in slope-intercept form, right? So we want to go. The other thing that we can do, though, we already have our slope. You can always go backwards. All right. So instead of going up and to the right, I could also say the exact opposite would be negative 6, negative 5, because that's still a positive answer, right? 2 negatives make a positive. So I could be going to the I could go down and left. So let's go backwards. Down 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Back 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's my other point. Hey, he's actually not here today. Do you want me to just hold on to it? Or, which office are you from? Esau. Could you do me a favor? I got a pass today that's not for one of my students. Would you mind dropping it off while you're in the other errands? Uh-oh. I said it. Well, never mind. Hang on, I covered it up with something. Oh, there it is. You know where Mr. Reed's room is? Yeah, he's in 634. That's where it's at. Thank you. Oh, sorry, guys. So we had our second point. Now all we had to do was draw our line. So connect the dots, and that's our graph. On number 12. Now, again, on some of these graphs you had to think about going the opposite way, because you couldn't always graph the second point using the slope on the graph that was given. If you wanted to extend the graph and graph the other point using that slope, that's fine too. So like on number 12, we have a y-intercept at negative 4. So that means we have a point at 0, negative 4. So down at 0, negative 4, we got a point. Then the slope is negative 5, 3, which would be telling us to go down and to the right. Again, if I go down to the right, it's going to be somewhere way down here. You could extend your graph if you want to. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, over 3, 1, 2, 3. So right about there. Or, and just like we did on the last one, if you do the exact opposite, so call the top one positive, call the bottom one negative instead, this would be saying up and to the left. We could do that. So up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and left 3, 1, 2, 3. Either way, you have at least 2 points to make a line. Should look something like that. All right, last two. I believe these two fit on the graph if you just graphed with the slope that was given. So these two are a little bit easier actually. So if we have our starting point here, which is our b value, our y-intercept, this is -5, which is a point at 0, -5. That's way down there. But then our slope is a +2. You can read it as 2 over 1. So that's saying up and to the right. So from that point, go up 2 to the right 1. So up 2 to the right 1. And again, you could do that as many times as you need to make a straight line. And that'd be it. And then again, 14, same thing. Y-intercept, -2, which would mean that we have a point at 0, -2. And then our slope, -3, 5. That's telling us we're going down and to the right. So 1, 2, 3. To the right 5. Got a point there. Again, you could stop there if you want to. You could also go up and to the left. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, sorry, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, no matter which way you go, have the points, connect the dots, and you got yourself your graph. And that's it. Any questions on the work from yesterday? Yeah, not. Again, it's not going to be a full page of these because we have the stuff from last week too, and I'm not going to give you more than 20 questions. I said no more than 20 questions. Probably since we're doing graphing, it's probably going to be less because, as you can see, 6 graphing problems is all that fits on one side of a piece of paper. I don't like making the test more than a sheet of paper, so you probably won't have. I would guess, I haven't finished making it yet, but I'd guess somewhere around like 14 questions maybe on the next test. All right. Any other questions with this before we move on to the rest of the notes?